All right, hopefully that's better. I was trying to join from my phone and my computer at the same time.
Oh, yeah, no. So now let me just make sure I've got everybody here. And we can get rolling. Okay, we are recording. So if we would like to proceed. Hang on, I got one more correction to do. Thank you, Bonnie. We have to, Carol's not on yet. So let me get Carol going. Excuse me one moment while I check on Carol.
I could have sworn I combed my hair before I came over here to the desk. Has a mind of its own, right?
I know how to fix that.
Yeah, I see that. I knew a lot of guys that did that.
Okay. So Carol should be joining us any moment.
Ta-da!
Yay, there she is. Okay, let the proceedings begin. At this time, I would like to turn this beginning portion over to the chairman of the committee, our council member, Danny Cartwright.
Thank you, Mary Beth. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Public Services Facility and Finance meeting, which includes the library. Pursuant to Executive Order N2920, meetings will be held via Zoom format, and you can participate.
Go ahead.
So you can participate in the Zoom meeting by downloading the software or by telephone. When you join the meeting, you'll be muted by default. To inform the clerk that you would like to make a public comment, you will use the raise your hand function or feature, and it should be located at the bottom of the screen. However, if you are joining us by telephone, you will use the star
Danny, you froze. Okay, let me pick up where he left off. If you're joining by Zoom, you will be muted by default. To inform the clerk that you would like to make a public comment during each agenda item, dial 9 to raise your hand. This is if you're on the phone. Or on the screen, there is a little raise your hand feature, and you can use that if you're joining video-wise. And I will unmute you when it's your turn to speak, and will identify you by the last digits of your phone number or the name that is shown. At this point, we call the meeting to order at 3:09 p.m. And would it be rude to do the pledge without the chairman? Let's wait and see if he can jump back in. I feel as though the Jeopardy theme song should be playing in the background. Linda Kelly, in absence of Danny until he comes back, would you like to do the honors of leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. Should we stand or do we just sit down with our hand on our hearts? I'm thinking we stand, right? And you've got the flag there. I see it. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do you want me to continue with roll call?
Sorry, folks, I had an internet interruption.
Okay. All right.
Linda, did you take over?
We just did the pledge. We just finished. So now you're on.
Okay, well, thank you for doing that. Appreciate it. And again, I'm sorry for the internet interruption. I'll have to get with Wave about that. Okay, so since we have completed the pledge, then at this time, I believe will Carol do the roll call, Mary Beth? Okay, so Carol, would you please complete the roll call, please?
Yes, Councilmember Baker,
Oh,
Uh-oh,
wrong.
meeting.
which means this is Public Facilities and Finance.
Public Services, Facilities, and Finance.
Okay, well, I have Baker on here, so that one's, so okay, let's go with this. Councilmember, Chairman Danny Cartwright,
Here.
Vice Chairman Linda Kelly,
Here.
David Ring,
Here.
Lorraine Theobald, Russ Kelly,
Here.
Jesse Lunsford, On it.
It's a tough one, but I'm here.
Jeff Duncan,
Here.
AJ Moyer,
Here.
and Christy Consolini.
Here.
Okay.
So at this time, we have the committee comment for items not on the agenda. And at this, I don't think we needed to use a raise a hand, so just speak up if you have anything a comment to make. Okay, I hear no comment.
I see no comments in the chat.
Okay, all right. Then we'll open this up for public comment for items not on the agenda. And just as a reminder, this time is reserved for the audience who wish to address the committee on subjects that are not on the agenda. The audience should be aware that the committee may not discuss details or vote on non-agenda items. Your concerns may be referred to staff or placed on the next available agenda. Please note that comments from the public will also be taken on any item on the agenda. The time allotted for each speaker is 3 minutes. It can be changed at any time. So now we're open for public comment. Items not on the agenda. Mary Beth, do you see any hands raised? Okay. Then at this point, I would like to ask for a motion to adopt the agenda.
I so propose.
Excellent. May I have a second?
Second.
Then it's so moved.
I think we need to do a roll call vote, please.
Okay.
Hey, AJ Moyer,
Hello.
so yes or
Yes.
Jeff Duncan,
Yes.
Patrick,
Yes.
Russ Kelly,
Yes.
Jesse Lunsford,
Yes.
Lorraine Theobald, David Ring,
Yes.
Linda Kelly,
Yes.
Danny Cartwright.
Aye. Okay. Now with that, Mary Beth, for the committee matters, is that going to be by Christy at this point?
Yes, if I could just do a few little introductions for those of you who don't know us. I'm Mary Beth Van Boris. I'm the planning director for the town of Loomis. Carol Parker is our planning assistant, planning commission secretary. Andreas Boer, who is on this call, is our town attorney. And I will now turn it over to Christy Consolini of Hauge Bruick and Associates. And she is your technical staff on this matter. So she will be doing the presentations to you on this assignment. And overall and in general, thank you all for being here.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for participating. I'm looking forward to everyone's input. Bear with me. I'm going to screen share with you, and hopefully this goes smoothly. Mary Beth, it shows it's disabled. Are you able to post the PowerPoint? Here we go.
Yeah.
Okay. So does everyone see a PowerPoint opening page? Okay, good. Welcome, and let's get started. So here's our agenda for today. So we'll go over introductions and available documents, the overview of the element, the review of the setting, basically our approach to the general plan update and things that we should be thinking about as we review the existing element, the schedule, and any discussion items anyone may have. So introductions, I think we have past this point. Mary Beth has introduced herself and myself as a consultant staff. Would the participants care to introduce themselves?
I'm Russ Kelly, past council member and concerned citizen.
I'm Linda Kelly, not related to Russ Kelly. And I'm on the Planning Commission.
David Ring. I'm not related to either of those two. And I'm also a concerned citizen.
My name's AJ Moyer. I'm a concerned citizen. And hello, Russ Kelly.
Howdy, AJ.
Jesse Lunsford, resident for the last 20 years here.
Okay, Danny Cartwright, councilman. Thank you.
I'm Patrick Farr. I'm new to the town council. This is my first year. And I moved here in 2019, so relatively new to the town as well. Looking forward to seeing how this goes.
We have a couple of people that are logged in but are not on the committee. Carrie Jones, if you could unmute and announce your interest.
Hi, I'm Carrie Jones. I've been living here about 10 years and I'm just dropping in on the meeting to see what it's all about.
Thank you. And Joanne, I'm not sure where that last name's going.
Sligamari. It's okay.
Thank you.
I've lived here, I don't know, 39 years, and I'm currently on the library board. So you have to do with the library, so I thought I'd listen in. Hi, Russ.
Thank you for being here.
Hey, Joanne.
And I'm Jeff Duncan. I'm Patrick's neighbor. I think I live around the corner from Patrick.
Oh, yeah, I think I do look familiar. Good to see you.
At the park.
Yeah, we go down there pretty much every day with Ben.
Yep, excellent.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for your introductions. We can go on to available documents. So if you go online to the general plan update website, which I have posted here, you'll find the setting. And then we will be posting the existing public services and facilities element. That's posted, and then we will be posting the draft that's upcoming. So you'll be able to look through all of those. And you can also look at the settings and any portions of the general plan that aren't related to this. You can look at any of the materials up there, and it would be good to do so to help you inform yourself about each of the different elements and the general background that's happening right now. We can go over what we're talking about for public services and facilities. So what is addressed? We're looking at services, so town government, law enforcement, fire protection, schools, libraries, water service, wastewater service, drainage and flood control, and solid waste management in terms of services. And then utilities, we have natural gas, electricity, communications, and then finally there's funding for these services that we will be going over. So general plan requirements. This section is really not a requirement of the state. It's not a state mandated element. So those elements are land use, circulation, housing, conservation, open space, noise, safety, and then in some cases, air quality and environmental justice. So this isn't a mandated element, but we are including it. And why are we including it? It is because it informs other aspects of the general plan. And it also helps the town when they're making decisions. And the general plan doesn't have to just be what the state mandates. It can also be items that the town considers important to their decision-making and roadmap for the future. So aspects of public services and utilities correspond to other elements. So for example, in housing, to be affordable, housing requires the presence of infrastructure and capacity for new units. In relation to land use, there's public service and utility facilities such as schools or libraries that you might want to identify or have categories for. In terms of safety, you don't want to locate schools next to, say, a safety hazard like the railroad, which might cause quite a bit of noise, and that's a safety risk. In terms of conservation and open space, the demand for more capacity or expanded service can affect natural resources depending on where they're located. So we want to make sure that we are covering that in some way. And then the establishment of greenways can facilitate groundwater recharge. And that's another item to consider when we're looking at how many residents are on wells and their own systems. So, and in terms of circulation, we want to make sure there are sufficient public services available throughout the community, and that can reduce things like vehicle miles of travel. So if we have schools located close to residences, then we're not traveling quite as far. Or if we have different uses nearby, we don't have to travel as far to get to them. So those are some of the ways in which public services and utilities informs those other elements. General plans instruct future growth and development, but they also help the town to function efficiently and effectively in the near term. So we want to be identifying existing public service and utility constraints to help the town prepare for future changes based on projected growth. The town can plan for improvements and work with service providers so that we can ensure the levels of service are maintained. The town can plan for fiscal aspects of services. It costs money to install new infrastructure. And if large developments are proposed in the town, mechanisms should be in place to ensure those developments provide their fair share of funding, and they've secured utility capacity and infrastructure so the town's existing residents and businesses are not adversely affected or left paying for it, essentially. So the setting, I know some of you have probably looked at it. Here's a map that shows, it's in the setting section, you can see the different services that are available in town and where they're located in relation to one another and the town boundary. Some of the findings in the setting for law enforcement, which is provided by the Placer County Sheriff's Department, based on the number of deputies paid for the town compared to the population, the payment for an additional 0.62, so not quite one full deputy, is needed to meet the county standard. Funding for an additional deputy or a detective is needed should any larger developments occur in the future. For fire protection, one of the big changes is that it's no longer the Loomis Fire Protection District. So if you looked in the original setting, it's referencing the Loomis Fire Protection District. And now it is the South Placer Fire District and also the Penryn Fire District for a portion of the town. So as growth occurs, additional personnel will be needed to adequately serve the area. And other items to consider are, should structural height limits allow for taller buildings? Say we have maybe the general plan update will allow for taller structures. Additional equipment might be needed, such as a ladder truck. So those are all things that we need to think about in relation to some of the other elements. For schools, we have the Loomis Union School District and the Placer Union High School District. And They operate at or near capacity, both of them. So future growth will result in a need for additional capacity at the school sites, and growth in neighboring areas can affect capacity. So that's another thing to keep in mind when we're planning for policies in relation to public services. The library, the Loomis Library operates and is funded through the town. So it's better serving the town, but it also requires town funding to operate. So that's one of the other changes that you will see in the setting.
Christy?
Yes.
If we go back to that slide, I think Russ Kelly, I saw his hand come up.
Oh, okay. Thank
He
you.
might have had a comment related to fire protection.
Sure.
Russ, did you have a question? There you go.
I don't represent the fire district, but I have some experience with the fire district. And one of the things that is very serious about the fire district is that the things that they need typically don't happen until you submit to the fire district your plans. And that includes your house and how much water you have to have on site to be able to do the fire sprinklers, those kind of things. The whole water infrastructure is 100% connected to the fire district, as well as circulation, the amount of space they need, and all those kind of things. And I think this particular one, we need to have another place where it identifies all the things that you would need to be able to respond to the fire district needs. And typically they don't address those until you submit a plan. And at that point, you may have a significant amount of money invested in fees and permits and hearings and those kind of things, when in fact, you may have to bail just because you can't provide those services from the fire district. So just a thought.
Yeah, no, that's very important. Usually people will have to submit very detailed plans before it goes to the fire district for any review or input on it. So at that point, yeah, they can find that it's very costly to provide adequate service that meets the standards of the fire district.
I have a question about the schools.
Sure.
A lot of their students are inter-district transfers. They're not from our town. And so I know when other projects have been proposed, if we got rid of those inter-district transfers, we have enough room for, new proposals. So I don't know how that fits into all of this, is to look at those numbers maybe of how many in the high school are not in our city limits kind of thing. I don't know. So that's just my question.
Yeah, no, that is a good question. Some of the capacity is taken up by students that aren't Loomis residents. And I think some of the Loomis residents maybe are not getting into the school that they are wanting to, that might not be available to them because the space is taken and they're going to another school within the district. So that is something to consider. And as growth continues around Loomis, that can be a bigger and bigger issue. So getting back to the setting, water is provided by the Placer County Water Agency. There are no issues with transmission and distribution according to PCWA, but not all areas of Loomis have water service, and some people are relying on groundwater. Higher density development needs to, or any development needs to demonstrate adequate water supply, but especially those that are proposing many units at one time, because that can place strain on the existing system. Lack of connection in some areas can increase costs for providing housing, or just for those who might be on a well but want to connect to the water system. It can be extremely costly to do that, to make that change. In terms of wastewater, South Placer, I mean, oh, go ahead. Was there a question?
I have a
Russ
question.
Kelly, yeah, there you go.
One of the things underwater is this water needs to be divided up into domestic as well as ag water, because we have ditches in our area. We have a lot of ag water that's being used, and so we definitely need to have those two on there. And it'll cost you $14,000 plus to be able to get a water connection to the system. The good thing is about our water structure is that the Placer Water Agency has significant maps where they can tell you exactly where every bit of water is, and we need to incorporate those maps into our system and to be able to update those as we update from as they update from the water agency. That's a huge thing.
Yeah, no, it is. I know they do have quite the mapping system, and we're working with them to get them our data so that they can overlay onto our maps. And I think it would be good if the town had that capability to be able to pull their information and be able to look at a site if a development comes through and understand what the water availability is for that location. And going back to the ag water, we do have a separate section where we are addressing groundwater, and that's going to be in the conservation of resources section. So it's slightly separated, but in terms of groundwater, that discussion, but it is referenced in the setting.
Actually, groundwater is not ag water necessarily, because
not necessarily.
the ditch water,
that's correct.
We have significant amount of ditch water running through Loomis, and that use of ditch water is very different than trying to draw it out of the ground.
Okay, thank you. So going back to wastewater, Placer County Municipal Utility District offers the wastewater service. And they too have a very extensive online mapping system. You can actually go into their website and click on a street and they'll tell you exactly what's in there in terms of the pipe sizing, any manholes or any other infrastructure they have. So most of Loomis is connected to wastewater service, but there are areas that rely on septic systems. And recently, SP Mud completed their the Loomis extension line that goes from Horseshoe Bar Road down Brace and down Diaz, and it kind of cuts across the south part of town, and so that has increased the capacity for the town. So future development in the region, though, can cause constraints. So as more people connect to the system, the less capacity there is. So we want to make sure we have developers securing the appropriate agreements during the planning process. Drainage includes any of your stormwater systems, and you're also connecting to flood control risks. So on-site runoff management is critical to reducing the flood risk, and we need to maintain existing drainages so that there aren't localized flooding areas. So that's another item to think about.
If I could take a moment and introduce Lorraine Thiebaud. She is a committee member and just joining the meeting. And to ask one question of you, Christy, do you want to take, we have panelists and attendees. Would you like to save the attendee questions all until the end, or should I bring them in as they raise their hand?
We can bring them in as they raise their hand. That's fine. And we're talking as we go.
Okay. Jean Wilson had her hand raised, and Jean, you can unmute and ask your question.
Okay, mine was a comment similar to Russ Kelly's. I read through this, the document online for this section, and noticed today it did not mention the canal water, which is a significant part of the water, the PCWA water. And I wondered if the consultants were not really aware of that. It really has nothing to do with the groundwater. This is a separate water system, untreated water, but it is important for the all the lucky rural areas that still have groundwater. This goes way back to the gold rush era. So that really should be included someplace in the report. And I was assuming it would be here under PCWA. That's a significant water source. And for many people, that's more important than groundwater, which is a lot sketchier in a lot of places. So it was basically the kind of thing that Russ was saying. I think it needs to be included. Thank you.
Yes, if you look at the setting, you'll see there are some areas under PCWA that are highlighted still, and I'm waiting on information for them from them to come in. So I'm not completely finished with the setting. So please bear with me. As I get information, we will continue to update the setting. Were there any other questions?
Yes, I have Jen Clark-Kretz. You can unmute and ask your question.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Christy. A couple of things. One, I think it might be nice in the beginning when you gave the map of all the services that are in Loomis, I think it might be nice to show actually the services that are just right outside the boundaries of Loomis, so that when we're looking at potential upgrades or connections, I think it would be important to see that. Secondly, I live in an area, actually I'm neighbors with Jean and with Russ Kelly, and we have septic tanks. And I know that it said on a setting that most of Loomis is connected to wastewater, but I kind of feel like it should be a little bit more specific, because a lot of us in the rural areas are not connected. And so I feel like maybe that has to be clarified a little bit, but thank you.
Russ Kelly has his hand raised. You can unmute. Thank you.
One of the things under solid waste that we're talking about is there's a sewer line that connects under Interstate 80, and it goes down Brace Road, and it ties in over at the Bass Pro Shops. That's where the pumping station is. However, depending on what your soil content is, where you want to build anywhere in Loomis, actually depends on what kind of septic system you can put in. And that can run from extreme cost to a nominal $10,000 or more just to get it engineered. And that's all approved by the county. And we don't have a lot to say about that, I don't believe, in the town. And so I think we need to divide this up into solid waste to where it's service accessible from our sewer system, but also what the capabilities are of a septic system, because it takes roughly 2 acres to put in a septic system. I mean, you can put it in on 1 acre, depending on what kind you use, but you also have to designate, in my particular case, I had to designate a secondary leach field in case the original one goes out. And consequently, that takes the land use away. I mean, you can't build anything on top of the septic system. So I think that solid waste needs to be identified a little bit better.
You mean wastewater?
Solid waste.
Solid waste refers to trash. So your recycling and trash generation.
I'm you're on a different page now. So I'm talking about the sewer systems and that.
Yes, so having a septic system isn't always feasible. So depending on the soils on your property, a septic system may or may not be feasible in the eyes of the county environmental health department. So yes, there can be all sorts of factors related to various, each property depending on where it's located and the conditions of that property.
I did notice in the general plan, it talks about soil and has a significant area there talking about the type of soil and that sort of stuff. So we should be able to identify relative to that, the environmental impact report, what types of systems we're capable, and just map that out in areas. So a person coming in and wanting to buy a piece of property that's vacant now, that wants to come in and build a house, it'd be nice if they had some kind of an idea of what kind of systems they might have. That's why I think it's most important for us to more identify so that people coming into our town can be aware of the costs that might be involved before they invest in the property, before they have house plans, before they have, invested significant amount of money. It's kind of a catch-22 for the town. I mean, we're not here to tell people where they can build and where they can't, but we're here to tell them what our guidelines are to where we can build that we know.
So we want to be careful there because there's more than just soil involved. There's, your groundwater level and other factors. So we want to be careful because we don't necessarily want to give a green light to everything based on a limited amount of information that we can feasibly collect for every piece of land in Loomis. So we want to think about that a little bit. It's going to be costly if we're saying, yes, you can put a septic system here and there might be other limitations. So that's where our wording needs to be careful. I see David Ring has a question.
Is this the kind of thing that's supposed to go in the general plan? Like I can see how the town would hold on to all that information, but it doesn't seem like the general plan to me, it doesn't seem like the general plan should have all of that in it, but I'm not sure if am I misinterpreting the scope of all of this?
No, I think you are correct. We don't want to go into the fine details of everything that is for a landowner to come to terms with. And it's not in the town's best interest to do that. So the general plan is more broad and we need to look at things in a broad perspective. So yes, you are absolutely correct.
So I think maybe if it was just a comment in the general plan that said it does, sewers, septic systems are a possibility, depends on multiple factors. You need to contact the town to determine these factors. I mean, it doesn't seem like we should put all of the maps and everything in the general plan itself.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Lorraine has her hand raised.
I was wondering if there was a percentage of the town that is currently on septics, if we know that, and what is the capacity to increase the sewer system should new development go in, or if people want to join the sewer system.
I don't have a number on who is on a septic system. And in terms of the capacity, it just depends on what is being proposed. So you could have a project come in and they might take up a lot of capacity if they're, say, high density, or a commercial or industrial use that requires a lot of water. And so that's why when projects come in, it's up to the developer to secure those capacities with the service provider.
Thank you.
So I think we should get back to the setting findings. For solid waste, we have Recology Auburn Placer, who provides the service. State targets for per capita generation are slightly exceeded in Loomis, but not by a lot. We can include efforts to reduce waste generation in our policy. So some things to think about. In terms of gas and electricity, PG&E is the service provider. Not all Loomis residents have natural gas service, where some are relying on an individual residential propane tank. And then one thing that we can consider is as a result of recent natural disasters and intensive demands, electrical service can be sometimes shut off during inclement weather. And at increasing frequencies on a regional basis. It's not something the town necessarily can control, but we might want to think about ways in which the town can ensure or secure service. David, do you have a question? You're muted.
I need permission. Back to the solid waste. Is it that the amount that we generate, is that take into account the amount that we also recycle? Like if we generated 50 pounds per person, but we were able to recycle 48 pounds, I think that puts us ahead of most of the state. But I'm just wondering, does the 6.7 and the 11.3 that we generate, does that take into account the recycling bit?
I'm not sure. I'll have to check into that.
All right, thank you.
And lastly, communication. So there's a number of service providers in the area, and this includes telephone, cable, television, and your internet connections. So there's a number of services. Not all of them are available to each area of Loomis, but there are a couple that we can access. So AT&T and Wave Cable being the primary service providers. So it's a market-driven item, so it's a little harder to control things that are related to utilities. But we do want to make sure that we are providing the town residents and businesses with services and working with these providers to ensure service. So the approach to the general plan update. We want to review the existing goals, policies, and implementation measures. Our approach is generally keeping, if it isn't broke, don't fix it, right? So anything that's relevant and written in a way that doesn't require a change, then we can keep those for absolutely. And then some items might need a minor update. Say it references the Loomis Fire Protection District instead of the Placer Fire Protection District. Those are things you might want to modify a reference to a provider or provide a slight change. So those are called modifications. There are some items that might be complete or not relevant anymore over this 20-year time span, or it's non-compliant with state regulations. So if there were something in there that said, we want to control growth by limiting who could have water, then that's really not, it's not going to be legally defensible in terms of current general plan requirements. And then we can also move or reference items that say they belong in another element, so that we're not duplicating things. I know there's a desire sometimes to reiterate an item from another element where it somewhat relates to public services or facilities, but we want to make sure we're not duplicating things to the point where, say there's a change to one of those other elements 5 years from now, and we forget to change it here, and we're not compliant or consistent with element to element. Another update approach is reorganizing the goals, policies, and implementation measures with a numbering system and an order. So right now, there's a clump of goals, a clump of policies, and a clump of implementation measures. There are no objectives that are listed for public services and facilities. So what we want to do is have goals, a related objective for each goal, and a policy for or multiple policies per objective, and then implementation measures for policies as needed, and there can be more than one per policy, or you might have a policy that doesn't have an implementation measure. So we want to make sure that at least every goal has an objective, a policy, and implementation measure. And we're going to number them because right now they're all just numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's very difficult to reference those policies when you're looking at the same system in each element. So some questions to consider when you're reviewing the policies. One, has the policy or program, goal, or implementation measure been effective? Does it address the corresponding goal? Is it appropriate? Has it been completed, or is it no longer relevant? Those we can delete. Does this policy belong in another element? Is it really related to a different topic area? How can existing policies or programs be strengthened? So those are some ways to modify what we already have. If we just need to add a phrase or a few words to strengthen the policies. Are there issues not addressed that should be addressed? That's a key item, so new items to add. And which goals, policies, and implementation measures correspond with one another? So as I mentioned, we don't want to just group them all together. We want it to be related to the policy. So an implementation is related to the policy, which is related to an objective and a goal. So we want to make sure that's clear. Here's the project schedule. So if you look on here, we are track 1. And so we are in the first quarter of 2021. So we're looking at, here we are with draft updates. And you can find this online as well. So if you want to look at that closer. So our next steps, we want to identify any areas or topics of concern in Loomis. Definitely review the setting to determine if there's any additional topics that should be added or if you feel the data is inaccurate. Review all the general plan update documents. So I know it's a big task, but read through them. You'll get a better understanding of the existing conditions in Loomis and each of the elements and what they cover versus what this would cover. And then review the existing public services and facilities element. So the existing as of today element, not the changes, and look at that and look at how you feel it should be altered. And then please submit any comments. So there is a comment form that you can find on the website. Please fill it out. David sent in comments this morning. Which I've looked at and I've already started to integrate some of them. So thank you for doing that. And that is something everyone can do for any of the documents that are on there. So if you have any questions, please contact me or Mary Beth. And there's also a link to the update website on there. And I think that is everything. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Christy, one thing on the additional topics, would that include the library? Are we including the library now in public services, facilities, and finance as a whole other section?
Yeah, it is a segment of it. So if you look in the setting now, there is a section on the library itself. And then we should be addressing any existing policies or implementation measures in there right now would address the library as it was under the control of the county system. So those are things that we would need to change.
I know it was in there, it was kind of more for a broader, yep, we're including the library. That, when you look at new things, not a whole lot's happened in Loomis, but that is a one big new thing that we need to cover. So.
Absolutely.
Christy, a quick question. When you covered your next steps, does that represent your recommendations at this point for this meeting?
So the next steps are sort of your homework assignments. So that is looking at reading through everything and identifying issues that you want to discuss or changes you would like to see made, or if you see any deficiency or an issue in the setting, please, fill out that comment form and we'll get that addressed. And then at the next meeting, I think we can start to go in, and I will have the existing goals, policies, and implementation measures listed with some recommendations on things to be added or obvious changes we should make, like referencing the correct agency or provider. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, before we move to public comment, I'd like to allow some time for any committee members to ask questions for Christy. So please use this time to do that, if you have any.
David Ring.
Oh, a couple questions. So you said the goals, there are existing goals. Are those online anywhere that we can see right now?
Yes, the existing general plan is online.
So you're just going to take the existing general plan goals and update those for our next meeting?
Right.
Okay. Right. And then I had a question back when we were talking about the sheriff's office and everything. I didn't realize you were asking questions in the middle, so that's why I didn't ask it at the time. But it said, I think it says in the updated one, or I can't remember where I saw this, but we are, so you say that we need to fund an extra 0.62 and that's based on the number that we're paying for over our population. But somewhere I read that there's another different calculation based on how many people are stationed in town relative to. And so is there a county requirement that we pay for the number? Is there a county requirement for how, or a state requirement for which one of those we use? Does it matter? Because in one case we need 0.62 more, and in another case we have twice as many as we need.
Yeah, so in talking with the sheriff's department, they pointed this out to me. So the town is actually covered well enough with people at the station, but the actual town funding is slightly short. So there are people available to provide that service. So should someone call, they're not going to be let down and waiting. To not meet the sheriff's standards. So the sheriff has their standards set in their guiding document. So that's what that is based on. So the town is slightly short in funding for the service, but they are adequately covered.
So we're not going to get in trouble.
You're not in trouble. You're not in trouble, but I think with say if a big development should come in and propose lots of units or a type of commercial use that might be, in need of extra service, then that's something that you'll have to look at again in terms of, or the town will need to look at in terms of providing adequate funding.
Is that, did I read that in the updated general? Yes. Okay, good. I wasn't sure where I saw it. And then one last thing, which is it probably doesn't belong here, but it is a public facilities, for the setting. We don't offer public transportation in the town itself, but the county does. And so it kind of belongs in the circulation element, but it is a public service and facility. So maybe we could just make a note saying there is public transportation. We talk about it in the circulation element.
Yes. Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any other questions from the committee for Christy?
Lorraine, you can unmute and ask.
Just a quick question, and that's about communication. Do we know the number of children in our area that do or do not have internet access that would affect their schooling?
That I don't have information on.
Is there any possibility of collecting that information in terms of goals to make sure that all of our students are able to connect with the internet?
That we would have to do a survey of the residents to find out if anyone did not have that. It's service providers are not going to be able to tell us if there's a child in that house that's going to school. It would have to be a survey that's conducted.
Probably come from the schools itself. I know down our street, there's 2 kids in one household and the internet service is so bad, they can't be on at the same time doing their Zoom. We have really poor, we're like in a hole or something. I mean, our phones don't work in our house. We have to walk outside. So I have a landline and, the cell phones. We just have really poor service.
Yeah.
So and AT&T said they wouldn't go down there. There's not enough need for it because our houses are spread so far apart. They don't want to put the infrastructure in to help these kids. It's just really sad. So
I'm concerned also in terms of emergency response with seniors that we have too little internet.
I actually posted a comment. Am I unmuted?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Good. I actually posted a comment. I sent that in. It's a long paragraph, and it doesn't talk about whether the students themselves have internet access, but it says that the current or the updated general plan makes this statement that Loomis is very well covered via the internet, and it's not really. There's only 45% have access to one wired connection. 45% of the homes have access to one wired connection, and although 90-some% have access to 2, it's really your options are AT&T or Wave. And if it's bad, if either of those are bad, you have to pay 3 times as much to use wireless. But the other thing that you probably should go in here now that we're talking about this is the town does offer Wi-Fi at the train station and at the library, and so those should probably go into the communication settings as well. And it's free Wi-Fi, so as long as the students can get there and they have a portable computer, they're allowed to use it. But I don't know how easy it is to bike with your laptop 4 miles or 5 miles to the library.
Yes, no, that is a good point.
That in our communications part, it says we're not deficient, but the fact of the matter is we are deficient because we don't have enough capacity. I have Wave and it consistently goes out. I had AT&T and it consistently goes out. I used to work for AT&T, actually Western Electric, to put their equipment in, and they don't provide the kind of service that we really should be getting. And then there are other options of access, but they're all expensive and they're all, we have a great demand, a large percentage of demand, and we don't have the capacity. So I think that statement that we make is it's money driven, and it's driven by infrastructure need of the offices as well. So it's the capacity is just not there.
I think the statement is misleading. With so many adults even working from home, that we need the capacity updated so badly. And I think we've got to do something. I don't know what we can do, but we need to at least be honest in our representation of what is happening here in the town.
No, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
It was
If it's not already a goal, it needs to be a goal in the
Right.
in the general plan. Yeah.
There you
It was
go.
my understanding that the library had problems getting good access, which is really unfortunate.
Okay, I can make a note of that in the setting, and that is something that we'll want to discuss with goals and policies moving forward. Thank you for your input.
Okay, so from the committee, are there any more questions for Christy? Okay. I don't see any or hear any. Mary Beth, do you see any hands raised?
I do see Jan Clark Kretz. You may unmute and speak.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Thank you, everybody. I've been hearing some really great comments and questions. One of the things that I was under the impression was that each section was going to do a survey. And it seems like this is a super important part of our general plan. And just based on the questions that I'm hearing, I think it would behoove your committee to definitely go forward with something like that for our town.
And we do have plans for a survey. So perfect timing for that. We are working on putting up a online survey where everyone can come in and put their concerns out on a map. So we will be working on that, and we will have each of these items, these topic areas in that, so that we can cover a number of items per survey.
And then Christy, with that said, I'm assuming and hopefully you're going to talk to this committee about certain specific questions that they'd like to see on there, because I've heard some really good questions that I think would really shore up our general plan. So hopefully you'll consider their input.
Definitely.
Thank you.
And what Christy's referencing as far as surveys, we're just preparing. Sarah Day at Town Hall is tasked with setting up a social pinpoint program, and that will tie all of the elements of the general plan in one place. We will be taking it. There will still be links on the website, but then those links will redirect you to that social pinpoint platform where you can pretty much stick a pin and a comment in it on any topic, any element. And within that program, there is the availability to do specific surveys. So, you know, we're just kind of getting that up. We haven't even got one total element created yet, but it's not far off, and the sooner the better. So we look forward to that.
So just so that I can understand, Mary Beth, what you're saying is we're not going to do a specific survey like we did for the housing element for this particular element. We're going to...
No, each element will have its own survey.
Okay.
So we will create a list of questions. With the Housing Element Committee, we reached out to the Housing Element Committee members and Town Council to, you know, see if somebody else had something else. And so we were able to create more questions and a little more in depth based on the committee interest and recommendations. So that will come out to the committee as soon as that portion is set up.
Thank you.
And Jean, you may unmute.
Okay, I had one comment and a question, and to Lorraine is absolutely correct. The library had a terrible time with our internet, but now the town took over our internet and we have fantastic web service there, as well as when they put it in at the park. So the town really changed the scene on that. So we were able to run the computers in public. That's a extremely helpful public service, having public computers available too. So that was a comment. The question I have is about the library, and that's my particular interest here because this is about facilities as well as services. So I would like some kind of general idea from you of maybe how much you think we're going to be saying about something like the library. And also, are we going to be speaking in this group of things, other facilities such as maybe a community center aside from the library? That was mentioned in our current general plan here and there a number of times. So is that something that also would come under the purview of this? So two questions are other facilities and kind of any idea how much we're likely to say or keep it very general on the library?
The general plan should be what it says in its title, general. So we don't want to go into too much details because that's where each individual organization will have their own plan. So we don't want the general plan to step on the library's toes of what they want to provide and accomplish. But we do want the general plan to address the library and make sure that the library has provides the services to the town that the town would like it to provide, and also that it has adequate funding for that. So we don't want to get into all the nuts and bolts of the library of, say, operating hours and things like that.
No.
So it'll be more broad for sure. And the second part was the community center you mentioned. We don't have a community center building. There is a separate discussion of parks and recreation. But this would just be covering facilities or infrastructure and buildings that we have or services we have currently in the setting.
Lorraine, you may unmute.
I did have another question. I know in healthcare and in nursing, we use some mapping tools. And I know there's things like Socio-Needs Index and Healthy Cities Index. I'm wondering, in the state of California, I'm wondering if we are using any of those tools to help us understand any deficiencies that Loomis might have compared to other places in California. I looked at them and they're helpful in some areas. We rate very high in some things and lower in others.
Well, you're more than welcome to share those links or databases with me, and I can look it over and include what is appropriate for public services and facilities.
Mary Beth, just to be procedurally correct, I think at this point, since we've already taken a question from Jean and she's an attendee, we need to open for public comment.
Mary Beth, you're muted.
The way that this went was the panelists were asking questions first. When Jan stepped in, that was our first attendee question, and then Jean. So I don't see any further public comment.
Okay, well, thank you. Then with that, I'd like to extend a thank you to Christy for a great presentation. I appreciate your time. And at this point, our next meeting will be Wednesday, April 21st, again, 3 p.m. And with that, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate your input.
Thank you all.
Thank you.